Are we rolling?
Oh, we're rolling.
We're rolling whenever you start to get into it. I'm gonna punch one of these.
We're waiting for you guys to say.
Oh,
sorry. Action.
We've already had action.
So did you bring the meat?
I brought some meat. Yeah.
Hey, what's up, everybody? We're with Dustin Warren. He's the director of our farm acquisitions and land acquisitions, and he was here in the offices. And when he says he brought the meat, we now own 120 cattle, 160 cattle at RADD Diversified with the cool RADD logo on it, and I think that's cool. So Amy and I were hoping Dusty brought us some meat to Florida, and he did. So,
he did.
You know, we still like you.
I have to buy my way into the company somehow.
Yeah. So, Dusty, tell everybody what's going on with our farms. You know, we're 3/4 of the way through summer. There's cool stuff that's going on out there. We have a new farm that you just got back from visiting. Just give everybody kind of an update.
Yeah, so our Idaho farm and ranch is looking really, really good. We've been pretty lucky this year with, we planned a little bit later in the season because we were obviously installing our pivots. And we got the pivots all finally installed.
What's a pivot?
Pivot.
I don't know.
Sorry. Pivot is just it's an irrigation system. What we've tried to do is eliminate a lot of our flood irrigation. There's a lot of waste with that. And so we put these pivots out so that we can basically do like a sprinkler system, right? And it just kind of drives over top of the crop, pivots across the field, if you will. It's kind of a quick explanation on it for those that don't understand. But it's a pretty efficient way of getting water on the crops. We can measure it.
When we do, I'm asking our team, when we do the editing, can we like throw a picture of a pivot up with the editing and stuff? And we can let it run live for everybody, so they probably already saw the pivot. Now they're hearing me ask the question, but that's okay.
Slice and dice.
It's okay for us to have active conversations with the team and you guys and at the same time. So pivot helps us take land that we couldn't farm before and farm it for the first time, and take land that wasn't farmed as well and farm it better, which all, you know, is to increase, you know, the income and different things. One of the questions the team asked you today, and a bunch of our team was here, we had about 60 of our team asking questions about our farms and what we're doing out there and those kind of things. How was that for you, actually, being on the spotlight and our team just firing questions at you?
Well, it's good just to see their response, or their, you know, there's a lot of people that have a lot of questions and they're trying to help everybody understand what we do. And so it was nice to be able to, for them, right, to be able to answer questions
directly for you,
directly to them, and then to experience with them or let them know who I was, so that it kind of brings everything full circle, if that makes any sense. Just kind of brings the different teams that we have, that everybody's kind of trying to get some tasks done, and how do we bring them together to make kind of an ecosystem, so to speak, at RADD Diversified.
I was impressed by some of our investor relations team, how much they knew about our farms, how much they knew about our farming and those kind of things, and that's good. But I also was kind of like self-critical in the sense that we could provide them with more like real-time education, like what's happening on the farms and different things. And granted, I know we post a lot on social and a lot of things, but there's more stuff we could be, you know, sharing with them and those kind of things. And so I think like maybe even creating like an article, like having Will interview you and create an article that those guys can read on it would be like a good task going forward. One of the things they asked was about GMOs. Like what kind of farming are we doing? What's our focus? What's our environmental plan with our farms? And you know me, I'm just a bottom line guy. So I'm like, all right, how much money do we need to put in? How much money is going to come out? What's the income going to be in it? And those kind of things.
Yeah, so, and I'm a little bit different because I focus on the long-term goals, right? As you do too, I know, but I don't worry as much about the financials right now. I try to figure out how are we going to improve the land so that money that we're talking that extra income we make based off of better yield, right? That's kind of where I focus my attention. Improving the soil.
Well, I think that's an interesting thing, though, because there's like people are always asking me what our goals are, right? And as a company, what are our goals? What are our goals, right? And I'm always like, I'm not worried about the goals. Like, I'm not worried about whether we're going to hit 100 million in assets, 200 million assets, $1 billion in assets, right? I know that we're going to continue to grow, right? And when we jumped to 100 and then we jumped to 200, I, you know, kind of blown away that we even got there, because I'm not even paying attention to that top. For me, it's kind of the similar with you. Like, I got to concentrate on individual numbers of farms, because individual numbers of farms is how we have to calculate the different things we're doing for the returns for the investors. But it's kind of like similar in the sense with if you maximize the best performance on the individual farm, the income will take care of itself.
Yeah, I mean, for an example, if we can improve our soil and get greater yield, and you're going to spend the same amount of 3 or 4 months of farming, right? Hey, but you get greater yield, but you're still putting in the same amount of work time into it, then you're going to be a benefit. If we go to a no-till, like a no-till farming, then we're not running.
So let's slow down. So
Okay.
we need like a glossary of terms, right?
Yeah.
For farming for people that are listening, right?
Okay.
So a better yield, right?
Yep.
So what's an acre of hay? How many tons do we get out of an acre of hay?
Depending on the year, obviously, has a lot of moisture depends upon what you're going to get. Meaning
So what would be a crappy yield?
A crappy yield? Nothing.
Okay.
but I mean,
no, really,
from nothing.
That's reality.
From nothing, right? I would say this year we've had a lot of really intense heat, right? It's not as much about the moisture in the soil right now for me. It's about the plant burning. So you've got this alfalfa plant. It can't really get the benefit of the moisture in the soil because the sun is so intense right now. But this year we're going to be somewhere around 4 tons to the acre. We really are pushing for 6.
So if you do 4 tons in an acre, right? And let's just say that is worth $300 a ton, right? I know the price goes up. It's been up to as much as almost 400. It's been down to as much as 250 in the last 2 years, right? So let's just call it 300 for the purposes of numbers. So 300 times 4 tons is $1,200, right? Now you take that times 1,000 acres, right? 1,000 times 1,200, it's 1.2 million, right? So when you talk about yields and you're talking about farms, now let's say you go and say 6 tons per acre, right? Well, now 6 tons times 300 is 1,800 per an acre. So you would talk times 1,000 acres, 1.8 million. Yeah. So it's a $600,000 difference between a low yield and a high yield, right? And the reality is though the difference between low yield and high yield, so everybody kind of understands, the cost difference to operate is pretty micro, right? Now to get the yield to where it needs to be, there's always the front end investment, right? Yeah. But year in, year out, there's a continuous investment that's not significantly different between the 4 and 6 tons, or is there? All that's just, guesstimating from what I'm reading, but you can fix it.
I can fix it. I can fix anything, right, in time. I think a lot of it has to do, there are some struggles with the weather that are always going to be a factor, right? We're going to have to struggle with that. Farmers have always had that problem where some years are really good, some years are not. You get greater yield one year versus another just based off of let's say what moisture is stored in this the soil versus, if we have a really good spring, you're going to have a lot greater yield in the beginning. Anyway, but the pivots really help us with that.
But I throw crazy ideas at you, like so Dusty was telling me how this year, because of the heat and the dry, how crops are burning and different things, right? I said, well, isn't there a way we can run like 2 lines left and right of, a field and then actually tarp it for part or create shade, right, over part of the crop for part of the year. And then I thought maybe I'm on crack thinking we could do something like that. But then Dusty said, it's not such a bad idea. So,
yeah, we just have to what we'll do is we'll just test an area, whether we wanted to go with something black tarp that kind of shields it all during the hottest part of the day, or do we want to do more of a net that kind of has some sort of reduction in direct sun rays, for an example. We could try stuff like that just to see. I don't know anybody that's done it, so
I have seen nets on crops before, but maybe that's just specific crops that are out there. Like when you drive through different farmland, you have seen stuff where it's covered in different ways, but maybe that's to keep other things, animals off it, or
right. And sometimes people will tarp them, just to keep frost off of tomatoes and things like that. Off, yeah.
But usually in smaller, like I see, like in Mexico, when you go through Mexico, you see smaller, like you'll see like 10,000 or 1,000 acres, but you'll see all their farming greenhouse, and you'll see it all,
trying to trap some of the moisture in the soil,
smaller portions, right.
Yeah, and there's different things that we can try. That's the beauty of it. We're going to go to a no-till, which I can describe real quick. A no-till is basically a way of planting a crop where it's like minimally invasive, right? You're trying to not disrupt the soil, and kind of let it act like Mother Nature has always worked and intended, right? So if we can go in there and drill into the ground a seed that we're not messing with the soil and just kind of trap some of that moisture that's already in there, I think we're going to get better results. It's kind of, a lot of people are doing it. They're really liking the results from it. The other thing that's nice about like a no-till scenario is where you're not tilling up the ground and you're not disturbing it. A lot of people like it because if you do a no-till, you just pass over it one time. You're not having to pass over, you got 100 acres, you're tilling it, you're making it this really nice dirt exposed piece of ground. And then you're coming back a second time and wasting fuel twice because you're basically doing it, you're covering the same land twice. So the no-tills are really good for that. And a lot of guys like to do a no-till because they can kind of leave a lot of the existing, like let's say they go in there and you're combining and you have all your byproducts coming out the back end of the swathers and not the swather, but the combine, it kicks it out and you can just really utilize that as a way to put natural fertilization to the soil, if that makes any sense. So I think no-till drill is kind of a direction that we're going to go, and amongst other things, which I'm sure we'll talk about in a minute. So
I don't know what we're going to talk about in a minute, but
we're just flying by the seat of our pants.
The topic that comes to mind, you were talking to me about bamboo, right?
Yeah.
And bamboo is something we can talk more in depth about, but talk about, like, as you're exploring different, commodities, right, for us to be able to sell in the open market, different things, like talk about your research, talk about how you're kind of diving into that.
Yeah, that's fine. I'm kind of excited about the opportunity with bamboo. I don't know the exact percentage. I wish I could give that to you right now. It just slips my mind on the exact amount of how much America imports bamboo from other places. I don't know the exact number. It's like 70 or 80%, maybe even more than. I can't remember the exact number I read. And I didn't do it very long ago. Just I got a lot of garbage in my brain, right? So I apologize about not having that exact number. But one of the things, because we are importing so much of it and we're using it, and it's becoming more and more popular because it's a lot easier as a renewable resource that we could capture. It grows fast. It's got a short growth season, if you will. So from plant to harvest, you're looking at about 10, 12 years. The numbers that I'm running right now, I'm guessing from what I can tell, and we're still working through the numbers to verify and to kind of fact check ourselves on it, but it's somewhere between $12,000 and $22,000 an acre in profit.
For how many years?
About 10 years.
About 10 years.
Yep, 10 to 12 years. And so that's a pretty good return. It really is. We're excited about the opportunities that it could bring to the table. And again, I'm still trying to vet that and to see if it's really marketable for what we're doing. I would say that we don't want to get too many people hooked on it right now because it might be a kind of a cool market for us that not a lot of people are diving into, but there are people that are in it, and we're trying to get into a co-op with them, trying to have them help coach us through some of the areas that I don't fully understand yet, but they've been really very receptive because they really want it to really grow within the United States.
Co-oping and farming is like an interesting concept, right? Because like we've been able to utilize, different places to be able to get financing for equipment. We've been able to utilize different, I think, co-ops to bring in seed and different things. And then you guys kind of have a natural co-op with the cattle farmers from where you're from in Idaho, where you guys kind of support each other. If they need to do branding, then you go up there and support them. If they need to move a large herd, then you guys, but if we needed help, they come and help us, or even, getting cows inseminated or whatever else, right? So how much time do you spend getting cows inseminated is the real question.
I don't want to talk about it right now or on camera, but it's not a big deal. Usually it takes a few days, a week, roughly between different things we do. We put seeders in, pull the seeders out. There's a bunch of terminology there that we can get into further on another maybe later.
But podcast, more of talking about like the co-op, right? In the farming world and what kind of exists and.
So I've got some friends that run cattle that are in Idaho, and they're pretty good friends of mine. And so they'll call me and say, "Hey, I really need your help. Can you come and spend a day or two? We're going to run 300 cows. So we'll go and dock brand 300 cows. We'll process them, and then we'll once we're done, we'll move them from one location to the other. So 3 or 4 times a year, I'm out helping them. But the beauty is that I ran into a scenario where it was our turn to be able to capitalize on that help, and I just called them and said, "Hey, I'm going to be processing our cattle on this day. Are you available?" And they're like, "We'll make ourselves available," and they were there. Mm-hmm. And so that's the beauty of the community. So the ranch and farm community, they're very willing to help each other out. Sometimes that's hard because when you're in the middle of your own stuff, it's hard to sneak away, but it's amazing that people will show up. I mean, I remember stories that I've read where you've got a guy with cancer or whatever it might be, or he's injured and the crops are not going to be able to be harvested, or it's a widow who just lost her husband earlier that year and they got all this crop they have to take care of. And the community shows up and there's like 30 tractors in their fields and they are going to town helping them get harvest in for the year. My brother, who is in the potato industry, he's got a tight network where, frost is coming and the freeze is coming. So you have all these farmers that are basically piggybacking and running their equipment to help each other out. It's amazing how involved as a community that the farming and ranching is. So it's a co-op or a community, however you want to word it. It's pretty cool. So it's been fun to be part of.
So when we buy a farm virtually in Tennessee, right? The most recent farm we purchased in Tennessee is 1,400 acres, right? How do you approach that? Like, I know there's a way you approach it in your backyard, but right, one of the most common questions we always get from people is, well, how are you going to manage it? How are you going to operate it? How are you going to run it, right? How are you going to make sure it's successful? How do you make sure it doesn't turn into this or that, right? All the what ifs. And I think our investors are always asking the what ifs because they're reasonably wanting to know, right? Is their money safe, right? Is their money protected, right? And I think that's always a reasonable investor question. Well, how do you run that, Tennessee farm?
So some of the things that I do just to calculate risk, I'm probably a little bit more into watching the risk side of things than others. But what I try to do is I try to always plan for the worst case scenario. I think you and I are always having that discussion. You're like, I don't care about, you do care about the risk, obviously, but you're also, well, don't give me just the risk. Make sure you give me the potential too. Like you're always worried about the potential.
Yeah. Well, I always want to know what's worst case scenario, best case scenario, and what's most likely, right? Yeah. Those are the three things in every assessment of every deal that is there. I think you, in my experience, right?
I tend to be on the lower end.
Yeah, you default on the worst case scenario, which is fine.
Which is what I'll discuss right now.
So then when you and I talk, though, more, you're going to default on you're going to hear more of best case scenario from me or wanting to know what that is because you default to worst case. So like Dory with our residential real estate, right? He'll do lots of times best case scenario, and he'll do sometimes worst case scenario, but the most likely scenario, right? We don't talk about it so much, right? And so he'll find me driving home a lot of times with him, like, here, what's the most likely scenario, right? Because he does really good with best and worst, right?
Right.
So you'll find me in those things because, like, to me, those are like three. It's like, give me the three numbers on a deal, right? But it's really, I just want to know worst case, best case, and most likely. And there might be 10 different numbers for worst case and 10 different numbers for best case. And so you might have 30 numbers between the three, but yeah.
So from a standpoint on Tennessee, the first thing I did is I looked at worst case scenario, and my worst case scenario told me that in the event that we don't have enough help, let's say that there's a shortage of personnel, and that's probably a question that a lot of people are asking. Well, what if you don't have the right people? Well, everything I buy, I try to do to where it's only run by one or two people, right? And it's always easier to have two people, but like Weezer right now. Weezer, from a farming aspect, is being run incredibly efficiently by Keith. Mm-hmm. We've given him some tools to be able to run
over 2,000 acres.
Yeah, exactly. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. But I run the cows. I do all my travel and I do all the stuff that I'm doing for the company. But I run the cows because I enjoy it.
It's almost like somebody else going to a baseball game. Like you running cows is like somebody else who's got baseball as a hobby.
It's kind of therapeutic.
I mean, you do it
for me.
There's an income side to it, but you do it because you love it.
I do because I love it. Exactly. But on the back end of it, we're going to get to the point where, because we're growing and everything, that I'm going to have to let that go. But Keith is running the farm stuff by himself. He's doing a fantastic job, and he works some hours for us that are long, but that's farming, right? But on the back end, let's say Tennessee we're having an issue with hiring people, which hasn't been my experience. I get calls all the time, people begging to work for us. They want to run farms. It's just something that people really enjoy. They want that opportunity. So I'm not really worried about that.
So here's a quick plug, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So we'll drop a link into the chat description, right? And so we're going to create a training program, right? Because we're going to continue to buy farms constantly. And these farms are pretty amazing. I mean, they're 1,400, 2,000 acres. Mm-hmm. Lots of them have nice houses on them, and so it's a pretty incredible lifestyle for somebody who wants to run a farm, who has some farming experience, some farming background. And so what we're doing through our Weezer farm is we have several houses on property, and we're going to be bringing people through to actually train under Keith that can go run other farms for us, right? And we're not selling anything here. It's an actual job, right? It's an ability for someone to say, hey, this is the lifestyle I want, and this is what I want to do. And I feel like I have the background experience, the work ethic, because if you're not willing to work hard, farm life is not for you, right? So we'll drop a link in there just so people can create a kind of like a list, right? A waiting list and different things. And that way we just have the interest of people who want to do that. I've been wanting to do that through our social for a while, so our team can drop a link on there. And I look to my right because that's where they are standing over there, right? But we'll drop a link in there, and then we can create a clip on that, because I think Weezer is at a point, where with that 700 acres in Weezer County, where we're ready to train people and ready to start preparing more people as they go out around the country and run farms. So technology is huge.
Yeah, technology is huge for us. And to back up real quick, so one of the things about Weezer that's nice is we got Keith who's running that. He's willing. He's a very good teacher. So we want to bring people in that we can either train or we can use as a vetting process, because a lot of people say that they know a lot about it, but we get to see somebody's mettle right out the gate. Just put them on some tasks, and we can really get a good feel on whether they're a good fit for us. So I think that's great that we can throw that out there for people to kind of reach out to us and tell us that they're interested. But back onto the Tennessee property, if I may, what I've done is I've looked at it from how can this property be run without anybody? Mm-hmm. So I'm developing a thing right now where I got my brother helping me, and we actually later this week on Friday we're meeting with a guy that runs Simplot. He's kind of a salesman for Simplot, and we're going to go meet with him and figure out we've got him on board to help us. They can plant for us. They can harvest for us. They can put fertilizer down if we need them to. I mean, I've got it all set up to where we don't actually need anybody. Mm-hmm. But that's costly, right? So we can still get the gains that we can still get gain out of it. We can still make money and generate that revenue that we need, but not as if we had somebody that we can owner operate. Mm-hmm. We prefer owner operated on everything we do, but we are set up in a good position where we don't have to. Mm-hmm. And then of course we always have the potential of buying the property and sitting on it and then having it leased out, because the lease market is starting to grow. And so we have that option as well. We like to own or operate everything though. So.
I think the reason I don't like the lease option is I just don't feel like they pay us on a price per acre, right? That makes sense. I think it's usually a temporary solution for us. Now I think for farmers, or I think people that own a lot of land that are aging and don't want to operate and run their own land, lease might be a great option for them and stuff, right? But then I feel like for us, we're not maximizing income, right? And we're also not necessarily, here's my problem with leasing. Like I do kind of look down on it in the sense that I just don't feel like there's many people leasing land. And maybe this has just been my experience with it to this point, that are going to lease the land and take care of it the way we would take care of it, right? And it's always been my struggle, right? Same with property managers in our business. The reason we property manage all our properties is because I've never felt that leasing companies or property management companies take care of our properties and take care of our tenants the way we would. And so it's really important to me that the land be taken care of. Talk a little bit about our conservation, maybe mindset or attitude towards our land.
From conservation standpoint? Are you referring to animal conservation, or just as far as
you have pretty strict rules with soil. You have pretty strict rules with hunting. You have pretty strict rules with the type of products we allow to be on our properties or not on our properties, right?
Yeah, so I think the comment that was brought up today in our meeting was somebody asking about the GMO, right? Mm-hmm. And I think our goal as a company is we're trying to implement all of these different, how do I word this? We want to not use, we want
to run as pure, we call it pure lifestyle, or we want to pure,
healthy,
organic, I think is definitely a goal that we have for our farms. I think in the beginning, that's always the most difficult, right, to do because you're inheriting, right, an existing landscape, an existing farm that's been run an existing way for a long time. And so those things take time to transition, to reclaim soil, and get it back to where it's supposed to be, to its natural state.
Yeah, I think one of the ways that we're going to try to do is we're going to try to get away from a lot of the different fertilizers that are out there.
Amy kill you if you kept using the word try. So what we're going to do is just teasing you.
That's okay. I don't mind changing my verbiage. So what we're going to do is we're going to implement more of the. We're going to use we're going to use cows, right? So let's say we got 80 acres worth of corn, and we just get done cutting it. Well, we're going to pull our cows in. We're going to fence it off and put a hot wire around it and let the cows come in and eat it. So we're not only saving our money by not having to feed hay for a month or so out of a month of the year, right?
They're also naturally fertilizing.
But they're natural fertilizing it, right? So we're going to try to implement some more of those different types of techniques, right, to help prevent the use of artificial fertilizers. So that's one of the things that we're going to do. We're going to try to change the way that we disrupt the soil, like we talked about the no-tills. Try, I know, versus we're going to.
I'm just laughing.
It's just part of my verbiage. What else you got?
I think sometimes people who are very humble use the word try in the sense that like they want to set realistic expectations and they don't want to they come from a different thought of like language for me is so important because I like to speak into existence everything that exists right within our world and stuff. And I think that's where I have passion with the neuro programming that we do for ourselves individually, right? And I know that's like a different topic, right, for different conversations, but
It's good to understand.
I think there's where I have so much intentionality with building and creating, because what we're creating, right, what's important to me is the pure goal is, right, is we buy as much good American farmland as we can raise capital to buy. Yeah. And we handle it, manage it, and treat it like American farmland should be treated. And that's incredibly important to me, and I feel like it's making an impact. When I talk with one of our team, Chris Pulitzer is a big part of our RADD America and our RADD Land, and we've been doing some deep research, and he brought me that foreign investors own 35 million acres in the United States, and China owns several million acres in the United States. And I look at that and I'm just kind of blown away. If you looked at the Homeland Security, you look at national security threats to the United States, right? China's been elevated to the top national security threat to the United States, over Russia. And I know it's kind of a different type of topic, but at the same time, like for me, I feel like what we're doing by buying more American farmland, bought by Americans, right? Because all of our, investors, right, bought by Americans. I feel like, there's a greater purpose and cause behind what we're doing. I still will never understand why our government allows, the country that is the greatest, foreign threat to us as a nation to own farmland in our country. But talk to me a little bit about, the mission or the cause or the purpose, the greater mission we have.
Well, I mean, I think you just said it. It really is trying to preserve our soil for growing crops to feed our families. I mean, we live in America. I think I hope that we all love where we live. And we're not perfect. We know that, right? We've got a long ways to go, but we've come a long ways too. But I think from my perspective, the goal I've always had is, when you die, you don't take nothing with you. So anything that you can give while we're here, a legacy or kindness or whatever it might be, what an opportunity for us to be able to buy and preserve America's soil to feed American families. Now, that's not to say we don't care about the rest of the world, but strengthening ourselves is a way of being able to do that, right?
Being the strongest country in the world's allowed us to impact the rest of the world.
Yeah.
And people can't, they don't quite comprehend that if like you don't take care of what's here, how can we impact the rest of the world? How can we plant seed in the rest of the world? Like Ben Shapiro said, and I'm going to get the analogy wrong of what he said, but basically he was like, yeah, America's the greatest country in the world. And someone said, well, what are your facts? How do you back that up? And he went through a list of facts and reasons he backed it up. He goes, we're not perfect.
Yeah.
Right. And so what I thought of in that moment was I thought of my kids. Right. I love my kids more than anything in the world, but they're sure as hell not perfect. Right. But neither am I. So, it's pretty reasonable. If somebody thinks America sucks, then they have some real, to me, ego issues about themselves, in my own opinion. But
yeah, just different experiences that they've had that makes them feel that way. I agree with you. The kids thing is a great point. I've got 6 kids, and so I just think about their future and what are we leaving them? Is it what happens in the next few years? I mean, I can see with the shortages of food, and obviously we're kind of seeing a drought across the United States. Like, what's going to happen with all of our
in a world where there
food.
should never be a shortage of food, right?
Yeah.
And with the land and the mass that we have, that should never be a conversation, right? But yet, even in the richest country in the world, even in, the most powerful country in the world, right, there was food supply chains in the last 2 years. There was serious issues, and the inflation and the cost of food is going up for lots and lots of reasons, right? And the reality is like, the question doesn't make, all of it doesn't make ABC logical sense, but what I know is that, like, if we're continuing to do what's right, and as our individual selves and what we invest into with farmland, then we're making an impact.
Yeah, I agree. I just looking at how influential we can be for each other, just supporting each other, and how powerful that is. You know what I mean? And so that's one thing about RADD that's exciting to me, and the opportunity that I have. I mean, I really look at it when I'm going out and buying stuff. To me, it's satisfying to be able to create and turn this piece of dirt and turn it into a food source to support more than just one or two families. I mean, that's pretty powerful, right? To be able to feed that many people. I think about all the people in the world that make millions of dollars that don't need a job. Why are they still working? And if you ask them, what's their purpose? And they're like, well, my purpose is to feed all these families, to support my employees. And they could have retired years prior to that, but they do it because they're trying to help as many people, because that's their legacy. So what are we leaving,
Well, I think it's fascinating, right? So for you found passion combined with career, combined with role, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's fascinating, because it's not like you knew how to make money, and you made money, and you made decent money, but your passion was always in farming. Your passion was always in the land. Your passion was always in cattle, right? Because you love your cows, right? And so I think that's fascinating how through RADD you found the vehicle, right? Because it's not like you didn't know enough about farming. It's not like you didn't know enough about. It's not like you didn't run your own ranch. You ran your own ranch effectively, right? And so, like, it's not like. But now with RADD, you found a vehicle where you can go do it on a scale, right? We can go do it. The funny thing is, as an individual, we're so limited in resources. But together, like in the mass, there's this massive amount of resources, right? And it's like, if I were to say I was going to go buy 3 years ago, a 2,000 acre farm, I would have said, man, that's like maybe, right? Maybe. But now, we're 4,000 acres in. Now we're, heading into 5,000 acres. We'll head into 6, and then we'll be at 10,000 acres as a company, right? Yeah. But now, as the gathering, as the group, right, as the combination, we have just so much more power, right, than as we do as individuals. So I just find how often these concepts cross over each other, where it's, if you talk about your community and farmers having each other's backs and what you're capable of doing to manage, cattle and herd is probably the wrong term. But is a herd the right term? Yeah, I screw up these terms sometimes when it comes to farming. So you have that community, right? And then within our RADD community, right, you have the ability to do more together than by yourself, or then, you have vehicles, right, to be able to go do more things. So when I talk about vehicles, I just talk about income vehicles. There's different ways that people make income, or different sectors of income vehicles. And so, one of RADD's, income vehicles is obviously our income producing farms. What else would you think would be cool for people to know about, our farming, or our approach, or how we look at things? I went ADD as hell though over that last cycle, but that's all right. That's
okay. But that's how I talk. So, interesting stuff. I mean, I think that people should probably maybe understand, how lucky we feel, right? Like from my perspective, there's a lot of ranchers and farmers out there right now that are in a position where they've done this their whole lives, right? It's like me prior to my involvement with RADD, where I've had some property, I sold some property, I did really well on it, but then I look at, I've always wanted to have a ranch, I always wanted to run my ranch. That's kind of was like my long-term goal, is to finish my corporate career and then leave it at some point, and then just kind of ranch and farm and hang out.
I just got you to leave it sooner.
Much sooner, like way sooner than I thought I was going to be able to do. And so, but I just want everybody to kind of understand that. I mean, we feel pretty blessed because we've been able to make it happen. So from my perspective, that's where I'm at with it. And also, there's a lot of people out there that want this, but they can't. And so maybe, like, my mind tells me that with what we're doing in the growth, maybe there's opportunities in the future that we haven't thought of yet, maybe. Like, meaning we can bring people on and help them get to a point where they're running their own farm or their own ranch for RADD Diversified, but it's their baby. Like, empowering people to be able to get what they want, right?
Well,
And
I think
be able to
that's
run
pretty cool. I think everybody who invests into, like, RADD Diversified, RADD and or RADD Land, right? I think they are now in essence, right? They have an equity piece, they have a stock price, right? They have a stock piece, right? In land, in farming, right? And they're part of the journey. I've always believed that, one of the greatest powers for our team and our people that work here at RADD is they can invest in deals. They can invest in real estate. And we have a ton of team members here at RADD that have invested in their own deals and their own real estate through the company. And, a lot of our employees obviously are own stock, right? In RADD, I know that you do.
Yeah.
And so, I think that's kind of the cool thing is that, like, you are in the game. And I think that's always step one. I always teach everybody, like, if you want to be a real estate investor, you want to build wealth, you want to get into it, well, then you got to be in the game.
Yeah.
And if you're not in the game, then the longer you're not in the game, the longer it'll be before you get into the game, right? And the more significant the threshold that you have to cross to get in the game is, the longer you wait. And so I always think I like that. I've always liked that part of RADD and what that does for people, because it creates an immediacy into being in the game. So we are out of time, but we're gonna wrap up. But I think it was pretty cool. I think we shared a lot. I think people got a lot out of it. I'm really glad that. What are you pointing at?
So too.
These bastards that are part of my team just interrupt. No, I'm just kidding. No, our team, our guys here in the studio had great questions, right? One of the things I wanted to ask about is future properties. Why don't you just kind of run through some of the stuff you're looking at? I mean, we've looked at everything from a $20 million property in Utah in the last couple months to 1,000 acres that we can buy dirt cheap that we think we can actually turn into something maybe pretty incredible. But why don't you take people through some of it? I know Northeast is one of our next big journeys.
A couple of things real fast. We're looking at some properties that are right on the East Coast, and I'm pretty excited about the potential there. I've been running the numbers. I've triple and quadruple checked myself, and so we'll be making a play on that here this week. The other thing that's kind of exciting is some diversity. I'm actually headed to a place this week here in a couple days, and we're going to go look at it. And they have rice on the property, so it's a crop that we don't currently grow on anything that we own now. So I'm excited about that. So as far as future growth opportunities, we're trying to expand and have some diversity to our portfolio as far as the farming and ranching. So rice is our next target.
I mean, so many things have trade-offs, right? Like if you do the same crop over and over and over, there's definitely a knowledge bank and there's definitely a knowledge skill to that. Yeah. But there's also a risk to being, very segmented into a singular crop, right? Something goes wrong with an industry, something goes wrong, the market gets flooded by a certain crop for some reason, right? I know in the 80s, my parents were invested very much into the I believe it was the wheat market. I could be wrong, but they were very much grain. They're invested heavily into grain, and then the federal government released federal reserves of grain, and the price of grain fell through the ground, right? And sometimes, our government doesn't understand all of the consequences of different actions, and they go try and fix one problem, and then another problem occurs, and that's not a criticism. That's just life, right? Yeah. I think sometimes you try to fix one thing, and you can create another problem, and you got to be able to see 7 steps, 12 steps down the road. At least every time I try to fix something or change something in RADD, I'm trying to look 25 steps down the road of what other problem that can create by fixing, the challenge here. So, but then the trade-off with diversified crops, right, is you have to work hard at the research, hard at the knowledge, hard at of getting deep into an industry. But then the nice part is you're also diversified, so there's less singular crop risk of something going wrong in an industry. So, what other properties are we looking at?
What other properties? So right now I'm really just trying to, we got a place right down the road from our Tennessee property. It's like an 8-minute drive around the back roads, but it's like there's maybe a mile between the two properties that we're looking at adding to what we already have. So we're trying to build out from what we already have just for economies of scale. Yeah. So that's another one. And then there's another property that doesn't really focus as much on the agricultural side of things, but it might give us some timber potential. So it's just marketable timber. It's kind of a unique property. It's got a bunch of houses on it, different facilities that are kind of unique. So
and I do think, vertical integration wise, right, with RADD Diversified, I do think there'll be a time where, maybe we have our own timber operation, right? And so right now, continuing to buy timber, farmland with timber on it is good because it's planting the seed for the future, right? Right now, it's easy for us to go ahead and have somebody else, right, bring in and take the timber out and be able to sell that at cost. But as we continue to grow RADD Diversified, we don't know how deep, the vertical integration will go over time. With that said, we are a wrap, and we're at the end of time. You did great, Dusty. Thank you. I appreciate you.
Comment.
You did